Hello all, my name's Claire. I've worked in recruitment for over 25 years and I head up the charities and not-for-profit team here at Pro, covering mainly finance, marketing and HR roles. And as such, I'm constantly talking to HR professionals, CEOs and directors, and wellbeing really is very high up on people's agendas currently. If I can introduce you now to Hyrule. Hyrule is a leading global executive coach. So Hyrule, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Claire, and hello, everyone. As Claire said, I'm an executive coach, and for almost 5 years now, I've been working with my clients, whether it's one-to-one or in workshops, coaching them on leadership, collaboration, and confidence. Effective, smart, and innovative leadership is really important to me. Before I retrained as a coach, I worked in the city for about 15 years. So I've seen leadership done well, and I've seen it done in ways that causes more problems than it solves. Leadership done well is linked to having diverse and inclusive environments where people can flourish. And so this also includes looking after our well-being.
Thank you. And thank you again so much for joining us here, Al. Today's agenda will cover an introduction into the definition of well-being, as well as the 4 key pillars in the workplace, as well as exploring why this is suddenly on the boardroom's agenda. If you could put your questions to the webinar panel and tweets using the details in front of you, using the hashtag #ProWellbeing, please. So let's start. The big question, what is well-being, Hyrule?
The World Health Organization's definition of health says that it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So if we're thinking about this within the workplace, I think we also need to consider the 4 key pillars. The mental and physical well-being are the obvious ones, which get talked about an awful lot, but there are 2 others, financial and environmental, which we'll also cover today. So first of all, mental well-being. We all know that stress and anxiety is on the increase, which leads to a loss of profits because people aren't as productive as they could be. And so it's important to look at where the leadership styles and company cultures are exacerbating the problem. With 1 in 4 people experiencing a mental health issue each year, many of us will have friends, family members, and colleagues who have been affected. So what can we do? It's really important to have awareness around mental health issues, and you can do this by training up mental health first aiders within your company. Having them around means they're available to recognize people who might be struggling because they've been given practical tools, the knowledge and confidence in knowing how to approach anyone experiencing problems with mental health. Also, there's a free toolkit available for employees and employers to help with people who are returning to work after a mental health absence. It's a really fantastic resource called Return to Work Mental Health, and their website is shown on the slide in front of you.
Thank you, Hyrule. Although there has been a lot of high-profile coverage currently regarding this, in my opinion, some still feel mental health is stigmatized. So hopefully the advice on this site can help.
Absolutely, it's really important because presenteeism costs employers. People are turning up to work when they are ill, whether it's mental illness or physical illness, because they're anxious and stressed about job security. But if they're less productive when they turn up, then really no one's winning.
Yeah.
An alarming finding by the Chartered Management Institute is that almost 60% of UK managers have assessed themselves to be unproductive due to ill health for at least 20% of their working time. That's a huge amount of time. And this reduced productivity at the management level has undoubted repercussions on productivity down the organizational hierarchy. So what can individuals do? You can identify what triggers your anxiety and stress. To do that, you can get outside help to figure it out. For example, therapy, hypnotherapy, or coaching. It's also really important to maintain good sleep routines as they help with maintaining good health. Did you know, Claire, that after 17 to 19 hours without sleep, our performance is equivalent or worse than having a blood alcohol concentration of 0.05%. Now, the legal driving limit in the UK is 0.08%. So when you're not sleeping enough, you're effectively working whilst drunk.
Wow, that's an incredible statistic.
Now, also mindfulness is important. Mindfulness is our capacity to focus, to really pay attention and use our brain's resources wisely. However, it's easier said than done. Our lives are busy and we're distracted, so our minds wander. That's what they do. So developing and practicing mindfulness skills helps us to tame our wandering minds and flourish, which includes lowering our cortisol levels, the hormone attributed to stress. These levels can drop by as much as 15% when we practice mindfulness on a daily basis over extended periods. So this also has a direct impact on lowering our anxiety levels too. We have lower anxiety, so we sleep better, which means we have better cognitive function. Our memory improves. This also improves our emotional intelligence. If we become more resilient to what life throws at us, we can be more productive because we're managing the stress more effectively. Action for Happiness is an organisation in the UK that focuses on showing people what they can do to make their lives happier. This month, they've released a Mindful March calendar, and for each day, they suggest a simple action to help us introduce mindfulness into our lives. Claire, what do you think organisations can do?
Well, a trend we'll see many organisations follow is adding counselling support to health insurance care plans. It's really, really important that your workplace is open and your office is a safe place for people to talk about such issues. If you don't do return to work interviews, I highly recommend that you do them. It will help identify such issues and also get people talking about mental health wellbeing. I loved your mental health first aider idea, Hero, brilliant. If you didn't want that, maybe a buddy system, it could be a peer, it's more informal, people tend to be more open. Here at Pro, we've recently incorporated wellbeing questions in our review and appraisal system. So wellbeing for us has become normal to talk about in our review system. Research shows that most people leave managers and not companies. And as managers, it's really important that we all show care and also follow through. I guess the best advice I can add here is just to be mindful of your colleagues and peers. Be supportive and be understanding. So thank you, Hero. What's the next pillar?
All right, so let's move on to the pillar of physical well-being. Now, much of the time, people focus on weight loss, and maintaining a healthy weight through healthy means is really important. So much so that Cancer Research UK have a campaign going on right now about how obesity is the second highest cause of cancer. And obesity, sadly, appears destined to become one of the most daunting challenges for companies in the future. Recent estimates place lost work time due to obesity and its related illnesses at approximately 16 million days per year in the UK. And the number of working days lost to it are going to become staggering if current trends continue. Obesity rates are rising rapidly in the UK, and they're saying that up to 90% of men and 80% of women could be overweight or obese by the year 2050, which is a huge amount. Now, obesity is a contributing factor in many medical conditions, so rising levels can be expected to be accompanied by spikes in other health conditions, such as muscular injuries and skeletal injuries, back pain, recurring health problems, and acute diseases such as cancer. So it's really important to think about little things like, is it helpful to have cakes in the office all the time? You know, the constant bake sales and bake-offs that you see occurring.
Oh, no more cakes in the office here, or surely not.
Well, no one's saying stop eating cakes altogether, but we really do need to think about what other healthier options organizations are offering or encouraging. And we also need to look at our individual choices and how they impact our levels of fatigue and stress. So, you know, are we getting enough sleep? But also, did you know that even exercising too much can cause stress within our bodies, leading to higher levels of cortisol, which inevitably lead to weight gain rather than weight loss. But it's not just about our weight, it's about movement in general. Dr. James Levine in the States is credited with coining the phrase, "sitting is the new smoking." He says that sitting is more dangerous than smoking, kills more people than HIV, and is more treacherous than parachuting. We are sitting ourselves to death. And he's not the only one who believes it. Researchers have found and continue to find evidence that prolonged sitting increases the risk of developing several serious illnesses like various types of cancer, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. And let's not forget nutrition and the link to mental and physical health. Stress eating is a really important factor, linking back to what I discussed earlier about identifying our stress triggers is really important because stress causes us to engage in behaviors that we otherwise wouldn't. Behaviors such as destructive habits and addictions. It's important to look at the reasons that sit behind them because they impact our mental well-being. What might start out as a fun way to avoid our problems becomes a problem in itself. According to conservative estimates, 14 million days are lost to alcohol abuse in the UK every year. So, what can people do? There's various forms of treatment. You can enter 12-step programs. You can even have hypnotherapy, as that's been shown to help address addiction issues.
Hera, can I interject? What is a 12-step program?
So 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous work to a set of guiding principles outlining a course of action for recovery from addiction, compulsion, or other behavioral problems. There are now 12-step programs for many different addictions, for example, addictions to drugs, gambling, unfettered spending, and also sex and love addiction too. And here's one aspect of physical well-being that I bet you haven't heard talked about very often: dehydration. An estimated 50 to 80% of workers are dehydrated, affecting their performance, but also putting them at greater risk of developing heart disease and cancer or suffering a heart attack. So also increasing the likelihood of short or long-term absence from work and all the associated costs. So everyone, keep drinking water throughout the day. It's really important. Claire, I hope you've been doing that.
Not enough, but I will be drinking lots after rather than my normal Diet Coke, you'll be pleased to hear. Thanks for all the advice here, really, really useful. In my opinion, organisations are making good movements to improve employee physical well-being, such as offering flexible working for employees to go to the gym during their lunch break or that run in the morning, as long as they make the extra time up. Other initiatives I've spoken to organisations about recently include a cycle to work scheme, fruit in the office, and stand stations, an area where people can get off their desks and go and work standing. And have a break from sitting down. Generally, there is recently a greater flexibility to maintain a healthier workforce, and most even offer a gym discount as an employee benefit. So we've covered 2 of the 4 pillars we'll be exploring today, and it would be really useful if we could hear from you guys and just take a quick poll. So a quick question will pop up on your screens about now. And if you could just click yes or no in response. So the question is, does your organisation take wellbeing seriously?
This will be an interesting result. I'm keen to find out whether wellbeing is being taken seriously or whether it's a case of all talk and no action within boardrooms. Let's give this a few more seconds, give everyone a chance to vote, and we'll close the poll now.
Great. Okay, so thank you all for responding. That's really, really interesting, actually, very encouraging, because 73% of our listeners today do feel that your organisation takes wellbeing seriously. Hopefully we can offer some further thoughts and advice that we can take from today's session to increase this percentage even further over the next couple of months. So let's move on now to the next 2 pillars here on.
Okay, absolutely. Let's recap a few things first, though. We talked about how having high resilience leads to high performance and productivity in the workplace. And, for most organizations, almost 90% of their lifetime costs are its people. So companies do need to remind themselves who this focus on well-being is for. Well-being effects are supported by scientific research, so there really is no substantive reason why it shouldn't be higher on the priority list for all organizations. It makes financial sense. So going on now to the next 2 pillars, which in my opinion don't get enough attention.
Great.
First of all, financial well-being. PwC did some research last year and they found that nearly half of all employees say that financial challenges cause them the most stress in their lives. And the average UK adult has £13,000 of debt other than mortgage loans. Now, this is really important because financial stress impacts productivity negatively. Up to a 30% drop in productivity has been seen. And this level of stress impacts your sleep, again, having a direct impact on mental and physical well-being.
Hero, how do you get people to talk about financial problems?
This can be tricky, Claire, because people don't often talk about financial issues. Our ego and sense of status comes into play. The reality is that if you want your people to feel comfortable talking about any of the stresses they're facing, it's important to first create a culture of openness. Because this same financial stress can also influence a company's well-being, including potentially higher costs due to elevated healthcare plan use, lost productivity from distractions and absenteeism, and lower savings for retirement or medical expenses or one-off expenses. And your people are more likely to leave, or they might leave because of higher compensation elsewhere, with financial stress being the deciding factor, rather than them being unhappy in the workplace. And we do see some connection between salary and stress levels, although an increase in salary does not totally eliminate stress and can sometimes simply shift the focus of stress to another area. And the effect of financial stress on productivity is striking because employees who are stressed about their finances are nearly 5 times more likely to be distracted by them at work. Also, low levels of financial literacy mean that people struggle to make sensible and informed financial choices. So you can provide support and workshops for your staff, going beyond financial literacy and looking to more meaningful ways to encourage and measure financial security. Truly successful financial wellness programs are able to change both money attitudes and everyday behaviors that have lasting effects. Engagement and stress can also have an impact on recruiting efforts. Many of the best employees are referrals from your current employee base, and there are increasing numbers of websites that allow people to rate their employers. Those who are reporting financial stress are not as likely to be proud to work for their employer and less likely to recommend their employer as a great place to work. So it's really something that needs to be considered. What are your thoughts on this, Claire?
Well, we've all had our financial strains, and it's difficult to know, or it can be difficult to know where to turn when you do. If you can, I'd suggest giving employees access to good advisors or good financial advisors. Sometimes maybe an FD or a senior finance person internally can help with budgeting or financial planning. Working in recruitment, we're often asked about gaining pay increases, but the reality is for somebody in a lot of debt, a few £1,000s probably isn't going to help that much. But organisations can retain by helping, as well as making the workforce more productive. If you're asking for a pay increase, please do make your employers aware of your situation. If it's a new mortgage, a new child, or just simply you've been overspending, our advice would be to be honest. Other initiatives I've spoken to organisations about include a Save As You Earn scheme, bonus on an above average or higher performance. And recently, organisations have been offering, or some organisations, sorry, have been offering interest-free or low-interest loans. And a condition is that these are paid off in full when somebody leaves, which can also help with retention.
Yeah, those are really important. Interest-free and low-interest loans are particularly helpful to the new generation of graduates who are coming out of university with tens and tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt. So that's a really good development.
Great, good. And finally, travel loans and season ticket loans, particularly for people working in London. So now the final pillar, which I believe is environmental wellbeing.
That's right. This pillar I find exceptionally fascinating because it's given even less attention than financial well-being. Different types of spaces promote different modes of working, so we need to consider what we need from different teams, what will work best for them. So office design needs to look at how many open plan, collaboration and quiet zones are there.
Hera, we read recently about a study that stated the new trend for open plan offices can actually cause more stress. And here at Pro, we literally don't have any spare room at all, not even an inch. So we just bought a few colourful bean bags. So people now have an official breakout area or a quiet time away, and it's become an official do not disturb zone. It's worked for us really well.
That's really interesting. And the reason why it's important is that open plan offices are actually full of distractions. That's why you see so many people in offices working away with headphones in. A lot of people work better that way, particularly when they need to focus. Now, unfortunately, what I've heard happen in many office environments is that managers say to people who have got headphones in that they shouldn't do that because, you know, it looks bad. However, if it's helping them focus on getting their job done, you know, maybe they really need to concentrate on a specific piece of work, is it helpful to tell them to stop? I don't think so. Now, as well as the actual types of spaces that we have, you know, the open plan, the collaboration and quiet zones, we need to think about things like colors. It's a scientifically proven fact that colors are really relevant to our health. The further away our workplace or home is from direct contact to nature, the more important it is to use colors to fill the voids that this creates. The effect of working in a space that has poor coloring and lighting is usually indirect and subconscious. Nevertheless, it can cause headaches, fatigue, loss of appetite, even loss of interest in work. So factors to consider in color design are the activity which happens in the space, the amount of time spent there, and the amount of light needed. And actually going on to lighting, natural light from the sun is of course the most useful for us, but we're inside much of the time. And at certain times of the year, which are darker than others, we're just not receiving sufficient sunlight. So having the best possible lighting in a workplace will improve the working capacity and mood of employees, even our levels of alertness. I hope you're pretty awake right now, Claire. Wide awake, I hope.
I'm wide awake. I have a strong coffee.
Excellent. So let's talk about acoustics too. Sound and noise have a significant impact on us. We react to noise even if we're not consciously aware of it. And research has also shown levels of stress hormones rising for people who do not feel bothered by noise. People are sensitive to sound, so having the right kind of sound environment is especially important. So buildings need to be designed in a way that the right sounds are heard and the unwanted noises, like printers going constantly, are not. If you're lucky enough to be setting up in a brand new office, you can apply the Wellbeing standard. The Wellbeing standard is a sustainable building assessment system, and it's fast emerging as a leading human-centered approach to health and well-being in the built environment. Part of that is biophilic design, which recognizes that we have evolved for more than 99% of our history on this planet in response to the natural world and not to human-created, man-made, artificial workspaces. We became biologically encoded to associate with natural features and processes, and this need is thought to remain instrumental to our physical and mental health, fitness, and well-being. Since today's natural habitat is largely the built environment, where we now spend 90% of our time, biophilic design seeks to satisfy our need for nature into modern buildings and cities. Now, incorporating direct or indirect elements of nature into the built environment has been demonstrated through research to reduce stress, blood pressure levels, and heart rates, whilst increasing productivity, creativity, and self-reported rates of well-being. Now, dotting a few plants around the office will help because it improves the air, but it's not just about that. So if you can, get designers in to help you where possible. Now, also environmental well-being encompasses ergonomics. Workstation assessments are a requirement by health and safety regulations in the UK, and ensuring good workstation setup and providing effective education can increase the productivity of an employee by up to 40% and has a direct link to their physical well-being. So just small changes in the positioning of office equipment and posture can make a significant difference to the health of our muscles and joints, and so help to reduce absenteeism from work. And simple changes to the work environment can help an individual remain or return to the workplace. So summarizing good practice in design, a good design can return the following: increased concentration, reduced headaches, reduced eye strain through better lighting and therefore a more healthy sleeping cycle. And specifically related to biophilic design, productivity will go up, as do rates of well-being, and increases in creativity with reduced absenteeism and presenteeism are shown too.
Great, some really great advice again here. Well, thank you. All I can really add to that is simple measures such as offering ergonomic assessments, plants in the office to improve air quality, and offering an open plan feeling is small but will make a big impact, but incorporating some quieter areas into that layout as well. So we've explored the 4 key areas of wellbeing today. I am constantly having conversations with board directors and HR professionals regarding wellbeing, but also more recently talent who are starting to ask about organisations' wellbeing policies and procedures as part of the overall package on offer. Wellbeing clearly is key to the agenda to maintain a healthy and happy workforce, and in my opinion the charity sector do this very well. I've been in recruitment for a long time now, yet I'm only recently hearing about this. So why only now? Hera, why do you feel wellbeing suddenly seems to be on an organisation's agenda?
Well, employee well-being is one of the hottest topics faced in the corporate sector, certainly, as well as the charity sector. Perhaps that is due to the finding that, FTSE 100 companies, which have reported on employee health and well-being, have outperformed those that don't report on it by 10%. It makes economic sense to start conversations on well-being and to invest in well-being programs, especially when we consider the stats telling us that only about a third of all employees, at best, are engaged in the work that they do. A third of employees. Also, people are beginning to demand more from their employer, rightly so, I think. If we're expected to be in one place for anywhere between 5 to 10 hours a day, I think it's right to expect a certain level of care or consideration from our employers. The reality is there is no shortcut to workplace well-being. It should be considered as a competitive advantage, not just as a misunderstood cliche. Providing a good working life is what positions many organizations for success in the long run, and it's essential for leaders to acknowledge the links between well-being and the prevailing corporate culture in any firm. A successful well-being program needs to be championed from the very top of organizations, and yet all too often, well-being is seen as the responsibility of HR departments. And whilst they are core to its success, a well-being program can only truly succeed with leadership buy-in. Currently, between 40 to 70% of boards in the UK view well-being as a priority, depending on which studies you look at. Now, this is a step in the right direction, but I don't think the number is high enough. Recognizing well-being as a priority needs to go hand in hand with looking at the culture of an organization. The culture and attitudes towards work need to be consistent with the messages around well-being. For example, how are leaders and senior managers addressing increasing levels of stress and the increasing prevalence of mental health issues arising from high workloads?
Well, it's certainly a very well-spoken topic about at the moment, and I do believe it is being acted on in many cases. Hera, what would your advice be for implementing wellbeing policies or programs?
Well, the thing is, there isn't one model for best practice. The landscape is still evolving. And in any case, every organization is different. So what works well in one place might not work as well in your own organization. However, I'd say one thing is certain, though: to create lasting change means we need to look beyond a simple promotional blitz. It's a challenge for people to change behaviors. We all know that. So, as well as communications and education, we need to engage employees directly in the design, development, and implementation of programs to get their buy-in. And so to make the investment of money and time worth it, you need to know what your people want. And although individuals are being encouraged to assume more responsibility for their own health and well-being, there is growing evidence that behavioral change is difficult when the organizational context doesn't facilitate and support individual efforts at change. The work environment and management practices can even act to thwart such efforts, even when a company's strategies and policies are intended to be supportive. Let me give you an example. There are firms where there are on-site athletic facilities available, and employees may wish to take advantage of them when they have the energy and motivation, rather than at the end of the working day when they're tired and hungry. However, if your supervisors are discouraging employees from taking any time away from their desks during the workday, even when the employees are willing to work late and the exercise will give them a new burst of energy and brain power, then how does that fit in with the well-being policy of having an athletic facility in the first place? So it's really important to consider, is the messaging behind your well-being program being applied consistently by your leaders and managers? I know that it is here at Pro-Rec. Your policy on 90-minute lunch breaks for gym goers is a great example of consistent messaging and actions from the leadership team. And it's important because poor leadership and management have been linked with stress, depression, and burnout in employees, while good leadership and management have been associated with reduced incidence of such conditions and increased well-being. Something for everyone listening to think about is this: how are the expectations and behaviors of your leadership team likely to impact the success of any well-being strategy?
That's a really good question, Hero, and I think you've got lots of food for thought there. This moves us on quite well onto our questions from our attendees. Let's start with a question from Hannah Bornett. What are your top low-budget tips in implementing well-being initiatives? Claire, I think this one will be a good one for you.
Great. Hi, Hannah. I've got lots of ideas, but I'm aware that we are limited for time today, so I'm just going to go through a few. I am intending on writing some blogs on some of these over the next few weeks, which I will share. And also, if you would like to discuss any of them further, please do feel free to contact me. But I'd say fundamentally start with your team. If you haven't got an employee forum, I'd highly suggest you start one. We've completely changed our culture here at Pro over the space of a couple of years, and that was just based on feedback from our own employee forum. Productivity has gone up and our staff turnover has gone down. So talk to your team and find out what their ideas are, what their wants are, and what their needs are. Flexible working, core hours. It's really important to today's job seekers, and we get asked about it a lot. Dress down if it's relevant to your business. I've spoken to somebody recently about mental health duvet days, where they set amount per year and deduct it off the annual holiday allowance. It's important to remember you can only do this if your holiday allowance is over the statutory requirements. Really important to identify issues. Again, if you don't do return to work interviews, I highly recommend that you do, to both identify these issues and also start talking about them. Mental health ambassadors or mental health first aiders, I thought was brilliant. And the buddying system, which is a bit more informal. Breakout areas, cheap, low cost, so it could just be a few colourful bean bags, but it gives people a place to get away, and it's an unofficial do not disturb area. At Pro, we've recently introduced Wellbeing questions into our review and appraisal system. So every review and appraisal we have, that we know that wellbeing will be both spoken about, and we'll also look at action points in those areas as well. It's been spoken about a lot today, but it must be led from top down if it's going to be implemented and taken seriously. Finally, here at Pro, we love our dogs. Weekly, one of our human colleagues brings in a pet from home, which we all love. It's one of our favourite perks. It makes us much more productive and the workplace a lot less stressful. If you don't like dogs, maybe you consider goldfish. We have those as well.
I think I'll be coming in on your dog days,
I
definitely.
highly recommend it.
Thanks, Claire. Okay, we have another question here from Farhana Begum. Any advice on how to become a wellbeing ambassador and any ideas on any good wellbeing initiatives? Hero, I think you'll be good with this one.
Yeah, by now you might have guessed that I firmly believe in open communication being key to making any kind of change. So wellbeing ambassador activities can include hosting an event or dinner to share ideas about well-being with others, sharing resources on well-being, and promoting the benefits of well-being, maybe through an internal blog and social media channels where your people will see. Who you choose to be the wellbeing ambassador is really important. Not only do they need the support of the leadership team, if they aren't a senior leader themselves, they also need good communication skills. And it's also really important to consider their existing standing within the organization. As the role might involve setting up in-office wellbeing programs, the person needs to be resourceful and keen to network with people outside of the organization too.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, and that we've got some really good, useful, practical ideas there. Another question for you, maybe, Hero, from Alison. How do you spot the signs of someone who is struggling with stress levels but isn't open about it in the workplace?
I think to be able to spot the signs, you need to have some training in it. We talked about mental health first aiders earlier, and it's actually having them around in the office is as important as having people trained in regular, and by that I mean physical first aid. So mental health first aiders can go on trainings where they're given the tools to spot those signs and also know how to approach someone who might be struggling, because, you know, it could be an awkward conversation to have. But yet again, as I've said before, I think it's really important that even if you invest in getting someone trained up in mental health first aid, the overarching culture of your organization needs to be open enough for anyone to respond to that person as well.
Thanks, Hero. Okay, I have a question for you here, Claire. With your recruitment experience and speaking with so many board members, is there a trend that you're seeing in recruitment, in particular, in recruiting well-being people in the office? Should this be something other organisations are seeking to include in their teams?
Good question, and I'd say in an ideal world, yes, definitely. Interestingly, I noticed quite a few of our listeners today do have well-being in their job title. So yeah, if you can, certainly train and equip somebody as part of their current job role. If not, it can be something more informal. But we spoke about this a lot. It must be supported and talked about from board level down.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Claire. I think we have time for one more question. So we've got one here from Paul Matthews. Do you have any evidence of wellbeing policies actually enhancing productivity? This will help it make easier to sell internally. Hero, you've worked again with many organisations and clients. You've probably got plenty of examples to share.
Well, yes, there's plenty of marketplace examples. There's lots of stats out there on how well-being definitely improves the productivity of people, of organizations' employees. But anecdotally, myself and my associates have seen this evidenced in several ways. When it comes to one-to-one coaching with leaders, this improves their own well-being and ends up improving their relationships with the team members. So there's a knock-on effect here where they're managing their team members more effectively, and so their team members are more content, maybe even happier in the workplace and more productive because of it. Then there's also mindfulness trainings with follow-up support, because mindfulness is a habit that you need to develop. And this habit is so useful because it decreases stress, improves your sleep, and all these things build up again to a knock-on effect of higher productivity. And we also talked about ergonomic assessments, particularly for, you could get an assessment done for everyone in the firm, but if specifically someone is struggling with posture issues or back pain, it really helps them. And for companies as a whole, you could think about changing your desk setups, installing desks that allow the option to sit or stand while you work. As I said before, sitting is the new smoking, so standing desks are an excellent way to counteract the damage we're doing to ourselves by sitting all the time, like we are right now, actually.
Thanks, Hiro. I think we're coming up to the end of our session, and we do have a few more questions that we won't be able to answer today. So Hiro and Claire will get back to you on those. I'll pass you back over to Claire.
Brilliant, thank you. As Becca said, we've come to the end of the session and we have run out of time. And if you do need any further advice, please do feel free to contact either Hiro or myself at the details in front of you. Hiro, thank you so much for joining us today. Your insight really has been so helpful, and I hope it transfers well to everybody listening.
No problem at all, Claire and Becca. Thanks very much for having me. And for all our attendees, all our listeners today, I've got access to a wealth of resources which can be helpful to individuals and organizations. So I encourage any of you with a desire to know more, or if you've got specific questions, to get in touch with me via email, LinkedIn, or Twitter at Team Convergent. I'm happy to connect, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay, thanks again, everyone. We do appreciate you being here. If you have missed any of today's session, a recorded version of this webinar will be available and sent to you. In return, all we'll ask for you is for some quick feedback and some thoughts on what you'd like to explore next time. So once again, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.